I never thought an old attic in my late grandfather's farmhouse would change the course of my life, but that's exactly where the first crack in my ordinary world appeared. My name's Daniel, 32 years old, a mechanic by trade, and the kind of guy who keeps his head down, works his hours, and comes home to microwave dinners. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was steady until the funeral. My grandfather, Henry, had been a tough man, a World War II vet, farmer, and the kind of figure who believed men should never cry. I respected him, but truthfully, we weren't close. He didn't approve of me quitting college, and I didn't appreciate his constant lectures about wasting potential. Still, when he passed, I felt a hollow sting of finality, like a door slamming shut on something I didn't fully understand. After the burial, my father asked me to help clean out the farmhouse. He'd moved away years ago, and the responsibility had fallen to me, the only one still living nearby. So, one Saturday morning, I drove out past the rolling fields and the rusted mailbox, parking my old pickup in front of the weathered house. The place smelled of cedar, dust, and faint tobacco smoke that clung to the walls like a ghost. The attic was the last place I wanted to go. Creaky stairs, low ceilings, cobwebs. It had always scared me as a kid, but that's where I found it. Pushed behind a trunk of moth-eaten clothes and yellowed newspapers was a wooden box, no bigger than a shoebox, with my name carved faintly into the lid. My pulse quickened as I pulled it free. Inside were a stack of letters, bound with twine and a tarnished pocket watch. The letters were all addressed to me, Daniel, but they were written decades ago, long before I was born. The handwriting was elegant, looping, and unmistakably my grandfather's. Confused, I opened the first one. Daniel, it began, if you are reading this, then the time has come for you to know the truth. Our family story is not the one you think it is. There are things I did, choices I made, that ripple through your blood. Secrets live in our name. I could not tell your father, but you must know. I read the words 3 times, trying to make sense of them. Secrets? Choices? I flipped through the bundle, scanning bits and pieces. He mentioned names I didn't recognize. Eleanor, Thomas, a place called Miller's Creek. And in one he wrote, do not trust a man with a silver ring. I sat there, the dust thick in my throat, heart pounding. My grandfather was not a sentimental man. For him to carve my name into a box and write letters addressed directly to me. This wasn't random. He wanted me to find them. I stuffed the letters back, pocketed the watch, and carried the box downstairs. For the rest of the day, I tried to distract myself with cleaning, boxing up old dishes, folding quilts, but my mind kept circling back. Secrets, family, trust, a man with a silver ring. That night, back in my apartment, I couldn't sleep. The letters burned in my thoughts like coals. Finally, around midnight, I pulled out another. This one was longer, more detailed. He wrote about his time after the war, about working odd jobs, about someone named Eleanor who was the love I lost but never forgot. Then came a paragraph that stopped me cold. She gave birth to a boy, though I could not claim him. Circumstances forced my silence. He grew under another name, but his blood is mine as much as yours. Find him, Daniel. He is the key. My stomach dropped. My grandfather had a hidden son, which meant I had an uncle no one knew about. And more than that, why me? Why not tell my father? I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't just old man rambling. It was deliberate. My name on the box. My grandfather's insistence that I, specifically, learn this truth. The next morning, I drove back to the farmhouse, hoping to find more clues. I searched every room, opening drawers, flipping through books, checking under floorboards like some amateur detective. In the kitchen, taped behind a cupboard shelf, I found a faded photograph. It showed my grandfather in uniform, standing beside a young woman with dark hair and a gentle smile. On the back was written, Eleanor, Miller's Creek, 1947. The name again, Miller's Creek. It wasn't familiar, but I had a hunch it was nearby, maybe one of those small towns dotting the back roads. I pocketed the photo, and as I turned to leave, something else caught my eye. In the corner of the living room, half hidden beneath an old rug, was a loose floorboard. I pried it open with a screwdriver and found another small box. Inside was nothing but a silver ring, gleaming despite the dust. My chest tightened. My grandfather's warning echoed. Do not trust a man with a silver ring. I held it between my fingers, the metal cold, the symbol etched into it unfamiliar. Who did it belong to? Why had my grandfather hidden it away? By the time I drove home, my head was spinning. I tried to focus at work on Monday, but my hands shook when tightening bolts. My mind far from the garage. Secrets. An unknown uncle. A woman named Eleanor. A silver ring. I needed answers. That evening, I pulled up an old map online. Miller's Creek was real, just 40 miles away, tucked into the hills. I decided I'd drive there the next weekend, but fate didn't wait that long. The following night, as I returned home from work, I noticed something strange. A man was standing across the street from my building, watching. He wore a dark coat, his hands in his pockets. As I walked up the steps, he turned, the streetlight catching a flash of silver on his hand. A ring. My blood ran cold. I fumbled with my keys, rushing inside, locking the door. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my ears. Who was he? How did he know where I lived? And why was he wearing that ring? I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, letters spread across the table, the pocket watch ticking softly. My grandfather's words were no longer a puzzle. They were a warning, alive and breathing outside my very door. The ordinary life I'd known was gone. Whatever secrets my grandfather had buried, they were no longer safe in the past. They were here in the present, and somehow they had found me. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. I didn't step outside the next morning until sunlight had painted the street. Maybe it was cowardice, maybe common sense, but I couldn't risk bumping into that man again in the dark. I scanned both ends of the block before heading to my truck. No sign of him. Still, I couldn't shake the image of his silver ring flashing under the streetlight. At the garage, I worked like a ghost, wrench in hand but mind elsewhere. Customers complained I was distracted, and they weren't wrong. Every clang of metal made me jump. By noon, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for the stranger to reappear. I'd follow my grandfather's breadcrumb trail to Miller's Creek. That Saturday, I loaded the letters, a photograph, and the pocket watch into my glove box. The silver ring I'd found on a farmhouse floorboard stayed behind. Something about carrying it made me uneasy. The drive wound me through forested back roads and valleys. The town of Miller's Creek appeared like something out of an old postcard. A faded gas station, a diner with a blinking neon sign, and a main street lined with brick storefronts half empty. I pulled into the diner, more for information than food. Inside, the place smelled of coffee and frying bacon. A waitress with tired eyes and a name tag that read Becky handed me a menu. Passing through, she asked. Sort of, I said, actually, I'm looking for someone. Or maybe just a piece of history. I slid the photo of my grandfather and Eleanor across the counter. Ever seen this woman before? Eleanor, sometime around the late 40s. Becky studied it, her brow furrowed. Can't say I have, hon. But Miller's Creek keeps its history in the library. Old records, photos, the works. You might have better luck there. The library sat 2 blocks down, a squat brick building with ivy creeping up the sides. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of mildew. I approached the desk, where an older man with glasses perched on his nose looked up from a stack of books. I'm looking for records, I said. Around 1947, a woman named Eleanor lived here. He nodded. We've got town directories, yearbooks, even some personal letters donated over the years. Follow me. Hours passed as I sifted through dusty archives. My fingers blackened with ink and dust. I finally stumbled across a church registry. There it was: Eleanor Whitmore, baptized 1925, Millers Creek First Baptist. My heart skipped. I dug deeper and found a marriage announcement from 1948. Eleanor Whitmore had married a man named Thomas Hale. My stomach twisted. Thomas Hale, one of the names in my grandfather's letters. I photocopied everything and left just as the library closed. Dusk painted the sky when I walked back to my truck. Papers clutched tight. That's when I froze. Leaning against the hood of my truck was a man I'd seen outside my apartment. Same dark coat, same cold stare. And on his finger, the silver ring gleamed. "Daniel," he said, as if we were old friends. His voice was smooth, deliberate. My instincts screamed run, but my legs rooted to the ground. "Who are you?" He smiled faintly. "Someone who knew your grandfather well." I swallowed hard. "What do you want?" "To talk," he said. "But not here." He gestured to the passenger door. "Drive?" Every rational part of me said no. But curiosity, it's a dangerous thing. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. He slid in, calm as if he'd done this 100 times. We drove in silence until he directed me down a gravel road leading to a clearing by the creek. Crickets sang in the grass. Water trickled nearby. Finally, he turned to me. "Your grandfather was a stubborn man, always trying to bury the past. Did he tell you about me?" "He told me not to trust a man with a silver ring," I said, my voice shaking. His smile widened. "Of course he did. Henry never forgave me." "Forgave you for what?" "For Eleanor." The words hit me like a blow. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "You knew her?" "Knew her?" "She was my sister." His eyes glinted. "Which makes me your great-uncle." I stared, trying to process. My grandfather had hidden a son. Eleanor had married Thomas Hale. Now this stranger claimed to be Eleanor's brother? The threads tangled tighter. "You're lying," I said. "Am I?" He reached into his coat slowly, pulling out a folded letter. "Recognize the handwriting?" I snatched it, hands trembling. The looping script was unmistakable, my grandfather's. It was addressed not to me, but to Samuel Whitmore. The man tilted his head. "That's me. Your grandfather and we had an arrangement long ago, but he broke it. And when he broke it, people got hurt." "What arrangement?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned closer. "There are things you don't understand, Daniel. But you will. The blood you carry isn't simple. It's entangled. Henry wanted to protect you, but secrets have a way of surfacing." I folded the letter, shoving it into my pocket. "Why are you following me?" "Because," he said softly, "if you keep digging, others will notice. Dangerous people. People who don't ask questions first. I'm the only one who can keep you safe." I laughed bitterly. "Safe? From what?" "Family drama buried 50 years ago." His eyes hardened. "This isn't drama. It's legacy. Henry's choices didn't just ripple. They tore through lives. And you're standing at the fault line." Before I could respond, headlights flashed in the distance. Another car was approaching the clearing. Samuel's jaw tightened. "We'll talk again," he said, stepping out of the truck. He disappeared into the trees just as the car pulled up. I squinted, heart racing. A woman stepped out, flashlight in hand. She was about my age, wearing jeans and a leather jacket. "You Daniel," she called. I nodded cautiously. "Who's asking?" "Detective Carter," she said, flipping open a badge. "Asheville PD. We need to talk about your grandfather." My head spun. First Samuel, now the police? I stepped out of the truck. Words caught in my throat. "What about him?" I asked. She studied me, her flashlight beam steady. "Henry Whitmore wasn't just a farmer. He was connected to an unsolved case from 1949. And now your name has come up. The night air fell heavier. My grandfather's warnings, Samuel's cryptic words, the hidden letters, all of it knotted into one truth. Whatever this was, it was bigger than I'd imagined. The detective motioned toward her car. You're going to want to hear this. And for the second time that night, against all reason, I followed. The hum of Detective Carter's engine filled the silence as we drove back toward town. I sat stiff in the passenger seat, clutching the photocopied records from the library like they were some kind of lifeline. My knuckles whitened around the edges, though I barely felt it. "Relax," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. "You're not under arrest, but I do need you to be straight with me. When was the last time you saw your grandfather before he passed?" I swallowed. About a week before. I dropped off groceries. He wasn't in good shape, but he still gave me grief about my job. I forced a bitter laugh. That was Henry, always lecturing. Her eyes stayed on the road. "Did he ever talk to you about 1949? The year stuck like a splinter." "No. Why would he?" She sighed, flicking on her turn signal. "Because in 1949, right here in Miller's Creek, a man was found dead by the river, unidentified. No one ever claimed him. No suspects, no witnesses. Cold case. But here's the thing. Your grandfather's name came up in one of the earliest reports. He'd been seen arguing with the victim 2 days before. My breath hitched. Wait, you're saying Henry might have killed someone? I'm saying there were connections. Nothing proven. But a couple of months ago, we reopened the case after new evidence turned up. I sat frozen, the letters in my lap suddenly heavier. My grandfather had hinted at secrets. Yes, but murder? That didn't fit with the rigid, honor-driven man I knew. We pulled into a small municipal building, the kind with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Inside, Detective Carter led me down a hall to a cramped office. Files cluttered the desk, photos pinned to a corkboard. She gestured for me to sit. "I want you to look at something," she said. She laid out a faded black and white photograph. My pulse stuttered. It was my grandfather, young, hard-eyed, standing beside Eleanor. And next to them was a third man, broad shoulders, dark hair, and on his hand, clear as day, a silver ring. I pointed at him. "That's him. The man I saw. Samuel." Her brow furrowed. "You're sure?" "Positive. He approached me tonight. Said he was Eleanor's brother." She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "Interesting. According to town records, Eleanor Whitmore never had a brother. Only a younger sister who moved west. No Samuel." The room tilted. My thoughts scrambled. But he knew my grandfather. He had a letter written to him. He knew Eleanor. Or he wants you to believe that, Carter said evenly. Men like him thrive on half-truths. Silver ring, that's his calling card. That ring showed up in 2 different police reports from the 40s. Both times connected to threats, extortion, and 1 disappearance. But the man wearing it always vanished before we could pin him down. A chill rippled through me. Had I let a ghost from my grandfather's past walk right into my life? Carter slid another photo across. It was the crime scene from 1949, the dead man by the river. His features were blurred, but I could still make out the faint glint of metal on his hand. A ring. I gripped the edge of the table. So the man in the photo, the victim, he wore the ring too? She nodded. "And maybe the man you saw tonight took it, passed it down. Or maybe he's the same one." "That's impossible," I whispered. This was 75 years ago. He'd have to be over 100. Her eyes locked on mine. "Stranger things have happened in this county than you'd believe." The air grew heavier. My grandfather's letters, his warnings, the way Samuel spoke, it all lined up, and yet none of it made sense. "Why me?" I asked finally. "Why did Henry want me to know this?" "That's the question," Carter said. She tapped the stack of letters I brought. "You're holding something people have killed for. Whether you realize it or not, you're a target. I rubbed my temples. So what do I do? Hand them over? Walk away? You could, she said. Or you could help me finish what your grandfather started. Find out the truth. Her words settled into me like weights. I thought of Henry, stern, unyielding. I thought of his choice to write me letters, not my father, as if I were meant to shoulder this. I left the station past midnight, my head throbbing. Outside, the air was damp, carrying the scent of pine. My truck sat under a street light, solitary. I slid behind the wheel, exhausted. That's when I noticed the envelope on my dashboard. I froze, scanning the street. Empty. Slowly, I picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. Daniel, you're in over your head. Leave Miller's Creek. Forget the letters. If you don't, you'll end up like the man by the river. S. The signature was just that. An S. Samuel. My chest tightened. He'd been here. He'd been inside my truck. I drove home in a daze, every headlight in my rear view making me flinch. Once inside my apartment, I double-locked the door, sat at the kitchen table, and spread out the letters again. One in particular caught my eye, the one about Henry's hidden son. My uncle. Henry had written, "He is the key." I read it over and over until dawn, the words etching deeper each time. If Samuel was lying, if the detective was only half right, then somewhere out there was still a missing piece. A man with Whitmore blood. Someone who could tell me what this was really about. But how do you find a ghost from 70 years ago? I didn't have an answer. What I did have was a new resolve. My grandfather's secrets weren't going to stay buried. Not anymore. And whether Samuel wanted it or not, I was going to dig. The warning note from Samuel wouldn't leave my mind. I'd read it so many times the paper had gone soft in my hands. Forget the letters. Leave Miller's Creek. His handwriting was sharp, jagged, like he carved the words instead of writing them. I knew I should have listened. Walk away. Burn the box. Pretend I'd never seen the silver ring glint in the dark. But every time I considered it, I thought of Henry, my grandfather, sitting in that farmhouse, writing letters he knew he'd never deliver in person. He could have let the past rot with him, but he didn't. He wanted me to know. And now I wanted to know. The next morning, I called in sick to the garage. Instead, I drove back to the farmhouse. It was mine now, at least until probate sorted things out, but it didn't feel like mine. It felt like Henry's ghost lingered in every board. I hauled the box of letters upstairs to the attic and laid them out on the dusty floorboards. I tried to piece together a timeline. Henry's war years, Eleanor, Thomas Hale, and this hidden child he'd written about. I kept circling back to one letter in particular. Do not trust the man with the silver ring. The boy is the key. Find him. The boy, my supposed uncle. The problem was, Henry never wrote a name. Just the boy. I decided to take a different angle. If the man existed, his descendants might still be alive, which meant DNA. I grabbed Henry's old pocket watch, the one from the box, and studied it. The back was dented, the glass scratched, but inside, if it hadn't been cleaned, maybe there were traces of his DNA. A sample I could test against mine. If there was an unknown line, it might show up in a genealogy database. It was a long shot, but I was desperate. I packed the watch and letters, then drove into Asheville to see an old friend, Alex, a computer guy I'd known since high school. He ran a small repair shop, but his real skills were digging through data. When I showed up at his shop, he whistled. "Dan, you look like hell." "Thanks," I muttered. "Listen, I need a favor. Something private." His eyebrows rose. "Private? Like fixing your hard drive full of questionable downloads, or private like, don't ask questions or I'll regret it?" The second one, that got his attention. We locked the front door, and I laid out the letters, the photo of Eleanor, and the pocket watch. Alex whistled again, low. "Man, this is some History Channel meets true crime stuff. What do you want from me?" "DNA," I said. "Can you send this in?" Quietly, No trace back to me. He frowned. You want me to swab this thing? That's not exactly legal. I'll pay you. He studied me for a long moment, then sighed. You're lucky I like you. Fine. I know a guy, but results take weeks. Weeks? I didn't have weeks, but it was better than nothing. As I was leaving, Alex caught my arm. Dan, you're chasing something that looks like it's been buried for a reason. You sure about this? I nodded, though my gut twisted. I don't have a choice. That night, I dreamed of water. Cold, rushing water, pulling me under. I woke to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging. Last warning. My throat went dry. I scanned the street outside. No car, no figure in the shadows. Just silence. But Samuel was out there, watching. I didn't go back to sleep. 2 days later, Detective Carter called. We got something, she said. Old property records. Eleanor and Thomas Hale own a cabin near Miller's Creek. Abandoned for decades. Might be worth checking. I drove out with her the next morning. The cabin was tucked in the woods, sagging under years of neglect. Ivy crawled up the chimney. The windows were broken. The porch half collapsed. Inside, the air was stale with rot and mildew. But under the grime, you could still see the bones of a home. A rusted crib in one corner. A chest of drawers. Looks like they had kids, Carter murmured. I crouched near the crib, brushing away dust. My fingers caught on something carved into the wood. Initials. J.H. J.H., I whispered. Carter leaned over. Could be the boy. I nodded, my pulse quickening. Henry's hidden son? J.H.? We searched the cabin for hours. In the chest of drawers, I found a bundle of school papers, faded but legible. The name scrawled across the top. James Hale. James. J.H. My heart hammered. This is him. The boy. Henry's son. Carter exhaled. If James grew up here, there may still be records, birth certificates, maybe even living relatives. I pocketed the papers. Then that's where I start. As we left the cabin, I felt eyes on me. I turned toward the tree line. For a moment, I swore I saw movement, just a shadow slipping away. The silver ring. Back at my apartment that night, I spread the school papers across the table. James Hale, age 10 in 1960, which would make him around 70 now, if he was still alive. I opened my laptop and started digging. Public records. Obituaries, genealogy sites. Hours passed until finally I found something, a death notice from 20 years ago. James Hale, Miller's Creek native, survived by his son Michael Hale. Michael, my cousin. I leaned back, breathless. He was out there, alive. But before I could feel relief, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. You found him. Leave it, or he'll vanish like the rest. My blood turned to ice. They knew, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about Henry's past. It was about mine. Because if they knew about Michael, they knew I wouldn't stop. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what they wanted. When I finally tracked Michael Hale down, it felt like I'd been walking blindfolded toward a cliff and had just taken the last step. His name came up on a small-town business registry, Hale and Son Plumbing, based in Knoxville, Tennessee, just a 2-hour drive from Asheville. A single Yelp review from last year mentioned Mike Hale, a kind older man who fixed our water heater. That was enough. I debated whether to call ahead, but my gut told me not to. If Samuel, or whoever kept sending those warnings, was watching me, a phone call could tip them off. So I got in my truck before dawn, drove the winding highway south, and arrived in Knoxville by late morning. The shop was small, wedged between a pawn store and a laundromat, with a hand-painted sign that faded to a dull blue. A bell jingled when I pushed open the door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of grease and copper pipes. An older man was behind the counter, hunched over an invoice. His hair was silver, his shoulders still broad despite age. When he looked up, his eyes, sharp gray, unsettlingly familiar, met mine. "Help you?" he asked. For a moment, I couldn't find words. It was like staring at an echo of Henry. "Are you Michael Hale?" I asked. His brow furrowed. "Yeah. Who's asking?" I swallowed hard. "My name's Daniel Whitaker. My grandfather was Henry Whitaker. I think we might be related." The words hung in the air. Michael set his pen down slowly, studying me like a man sizing up a threat. Then, without a word, he stood and walked to the door. He flipped the sign to close, pulled the blinds, and locked it. "Sit," he said, pointing to a chair near the counter. His tone wasn't welcoming. It was a test. I sat. Michael poured 2 coffees from a pot that looked as old as the shop itself, slid one toward me, and leaned on the counter. "Now tell me exactly why you're here, and don't leave out a damn thing." So I told him about Henry's letters, Eleanor, the farmhouse, the silver ring, Samuel, about the cabin in Miller's Creek, and the papers with his father's name. He didn't interrupt, just listened, sipping coffee with the patience of a man who'd heard worse. When I finished, Michael rubbed his jaw. "Well, hell, I always suspected." "Suspected what?" I asked. "That my old man wasn't my real father." He gave a dry chuckle. "Thomas Hale was cruel, mean as they come. Treated me like dirt. Never looked me in the eye. My mother, Eleanor, she never said a word, but I could see it in her face sometimes. Regret, like she wished she could tell me the truth, but couldn't." He looked at me again, and for the first time, there was something softer in his eyes. "And you're saying Henry was my real father?" I nodded. "It's in his letters. He called you the boy. Said you were the key." Michael leaned back, letting out a long breath. "The key to what, though? That's the part one don't get." "Neither do I admitted. "But someone out there doesn't want us finding out." At that, Michael's face darkened. "The silver ring. You've seen him?" I asked. Michael hesitated, then nodded. "Years ago. He showed up after my mother died. Said he was an old friend of the family. Gave me a warning. Don't dig into the past. Don't ask questions. Same ring you mentioned. Silver, with some kind of crest on it. I never forgot." A chill rippled through me. Whoever Samuel was, he'd been watching this family for decades. I leaned forward. "Do you know why?" Michael shook his head. "No, but I'll tell you this. I've got a son. Grown man, 35. If this thing stretches across generations, I want it ended before it touches him." The protective fire in his voice reminded me of Henry, or at least a man Henry seemed to be in his letters. Before I could answer, Michael's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and silenced it. But not before I caught a glimpse of the caller ID. Unknown. The same number that had been texting me. My stomach knotted. "That him?" Michael's jaw tightened. "They've been calling me for years. Never say anything, just silence. I figure it was prank calls. Maybe not." I didn't get the chance to press further, because the bell over the door jingled again. Both of us froze. "I locked that," Michael muttered. The door swung open. A man stepped inside. Tall, lean, dressed in a dark coat, despite the warm weather. His hand rested casually in his pocket, but there was nothing casual about the way his eyes locked on us. And on his finger, glinting in the dim light, was a silver ring. My pulse spiked. Michael straightened slowly, his voice low. "You need to leave. Now." The man smiled faintly. "Afraid I can't. Been waiting for this meeting a long time." His gaze shifted to me. "Daniel Whitaker, just like your grandfather. Stubborn." Hearing Henry's name from his lips sent a shiver through me. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice rough. "Someone who keeps order," he replied, "and you're threatening to break it." Michael took a step forward. "Order? You've been haunting this family like a vulture. What the hell do you want from us?" The man's smile didn't falter. "Not want. Protect. Some truths aren't meant to be uncovered. Your father understood that. Henry, too. But you," his eyes flicked between us. "You're about to make the same mistake he did." The air felt heavy, like the walls were closing in. My fists clenched, but I forced myself to stay still. If this man was Samuel, confronting him here wasn't smart. Not without knowing what he was capable of. Michael seemed to reach the same conclusion. He held my gaze, a silent agreement passing between us. Not here, not now. Finally, the man adjusted his coat, turned, and walked back out the door. The bell jingled once more, and then he was gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael exhaled shakily. "Well, guess we know he's real." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, and he knows we're together now." Michael poured another cup of coffee, his hand steady despite what just happened. "Then we move carefully. No more digging alone. You and me, we do this together." I nodded. For the first time since finding Henry's letters, I didn't feel like I was drowning alone in the dark. But as I stared at the door where the silver ring had just vanished, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about the bloodline. And someone out there was willing to do anything to keep it buried. The coffee sat untouched in front of me, steam curling into the stale shop air. My pulse was still drumming from the moment that silver ring glinted in the doorway. Seeing him, Samuel, or whatever his name truly was, made it real in a way that letters and rumors never could. Michael leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his broad chest. He looked calm, but his jaw was tight, his eyes locked on the window like the man might come back at any second. Finally, he broke the silence. "You realize what just happened, right?" I nodded. He let us see him. "That means he's not hiding anymore." "Exactly," Michael said, "which tells me one of two things. Either he thinks we're no threat, or he's warning us to stop before he makes a move." Neither option sat well with me. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to think. He said, "Henry made a mistake. Do you know what that means?" Michael shook his head. "My mother never spoke of Henry, not once. If he was part of my life, she buried it deep. But if Samuel's still hanging around, then whatever this is, it's bigger than a love affair. It's something Henry uncovered, something he passed down, whether he meant to or not." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the photocopies of Henry's last letters. I'd been carrying them since the farmhouse, folded so many times the creases were starting to split. Sliding them across the counter, I tapped a line I'd never been able to decipher. "The boy carries a name that cannot be spoken, the key to ending their order." Michael read it twice, his brow furrowing deeper. "Their order?" he repeated slowly. "You think it's an organization?" I asked. He gave a humorless laugh. "People don't stalk family for decades over plumbing bills." "Yeah, I think it's an organization. And if Henry called it an order, then it's old. Real old." I thought about the crest engraved on Samuel's ring, the way he carried himself with almost military precision. A shiver ran down my spine. So if we're dealing with some secret society, what the hell do we do about it? Michael leaned forward, lowering his voice even though we were alone. "We find out what they want with us. If Henry thought I was a key, then it's tied to blood, to family, which means we start digging where it hurts the most. History. History. The word made my stomach knot. That was exactly where this all began. Old books, old letters, secrets buried in the margins of time. And now we were going to dig deeper. We agreed not to talk in the shop anymore. Michael suggested we meet at a diner across town, someplace public where Samuel would think twice about showing his face. I followed him in my truck, every glance in the rearview mirror searching for that dark coat, that silver ring. The diner was a greasy spoon on the edge of town, its neon sign buzzing like a wasp. Inside, the booths were cracked vinyl, the smell of fried bacon thick in the air. We slid into a corner booth, ordered black coffee, and kept our voices low. Michael spread the letters between us. "The name that cannot be spoken," he murmured. "Sounds like some old-world nonsense. Secret societies always give themselves grand titles, like they're kings of the earth. I thought of Eleanor's farmhouse, the old chest, the brittle pages. Maybe it's literal. Maybe there's a name we're not supposed to say. A family name, an oath, something that ties us to them." Michael nodded, "which means we need more than letters. We need records, birth certificates, wills, maybe even church documents. My mother's family kept to themselves, but they were old stock Appalachians, the kind that didn't trust banks or doctors. If anything survived, it'll be tucked in a courthouse or a church basement." I tapped the table, a thought surfacing. Miller's Creek. He raised an eyebrow. "That cabin," I explained, "the one where I found your name. It's isolated, but there was more there than what I grabbed. We left in a hurry. If Samuel's been keeping watch, maybe he left something behind. Or maybe he missed something." Michael considered it, then gave a slow nod. "All right, but we go armed. And careful." We left the diner an hour later, splitting into separate vehicles again. The drive back to Miller's Creek was tense. Every bend of the road another chance for headlights to appear behind us. But the road stayed empty, silent except for the hum of the tires. The cabin was just as I remembered it. Sagging roof, broken shutters, weeds tall as my waist. The padlock on the door was new, though. Shiny steel against rotted wood. "Son of a bitch," Michael muttered. "He's been here since." I scanned the tree line, every rustle of leaves sounding like footsteps. "Think he's inside?" Michael shook his head. "No car, no tracks. He just didn't want anyone else going in." He crouched by the lock, pulled a small toolkit from his pocket, and worked it with steady hands. In less than a minute, the lock clicked open. Inside, the air was damp and musty. Dust coated everything, but the place had clearly been disturbed. Papers were scattered across the table, drawers pulled open, floorboards pried loose. Whoever searched here hadn't been gentle. "Looks like he already stripped it clean," I said, frustration bubbling in my chest. "Maybe not," Michael muttered. He crouched near the hearth, tapping the stones. Then, with a grunt, he pried one loose. Behind it, wedged into a hollow, was a thin metal tin. My heart kicked. Michael slid it out, dusted it off, and popped it open. Inside were folded documents, brittle with age, a family tree, names scrawled in faded ink, and at the top, underlined twice, was a name I didn't recognize. Aurelius. "The name that cannot be spoken," I whispered. Michael's eyes met mine. Aurelius. Latin. Old bloodline. We skimmed the papers. The Aurelius name appeared again and again, branching into other surnames we knew, Whitaker, Hale, and a dozen others I didn't recognize. My pulse raced as the truth sank in. Our families weren't just connected by accident. We were part of something bigger, an old line stretching back centuries, woven into American soil like roots. "That's what Samuel's protecting," Michael said, voice grim. "The bloodline, the Order of Aurelius." Before I could respond, the cabin floor creaked. Both of us froze. A shadow moved across the window. Michael shoved the papers back into the tin, snapped it shut, and stuffed it into his jacket. His hand went instinctively to the pistol at his belt. The door swung open. 3 men stepped inside. Not Samuel. Younger, harder. All of them wearing the same silver ring. The one in front smirked. "You boys weren't invited to this party." In that moment, I realized Samuel wasn't alone. He was just one face of something far larger. The Order of Aurelius wasn't just a shadow. It was a legion, and Michael and I had just declared war on it. The air inside that cabin went heavy the second those 3 men stepped through the doorway. Their boots scuffed against the warped wooden floor, their eyes glinting like they already owned the place. Each of them wore the same silver ring as Samuel. Proof they were cut from the same cloth. Members of whatever shadow they call the Order of Aurelius. Michael's hand hovered near his pistol. Mine gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Try looked steady while my chest hammered like a war drum. The leader, a tall guy with close-cropped hair and a scar running from his ear to his jaw, took a step closer. His smirk was cold. "You've been digging where you don't belong." Michael didn't flinch. "And you've been watching families that don't belong to you. Who the hell do you think you are?" The man chuckled, a sound that made my skin crawl. "We're the ones keeping order, while fools like you go chasing ghosts." Hand over the tin. My pulse spiked. They knew about it. Michael shifted slightly. Squaring his shoulders, not a chance. For a moment, silence stretched between us, tense as a drawn bowstring. Then the man snapped his fingers. The two others fanned out, one to the left, one to the right. I realized fast we were boxing. The scar man spoke again, voice low and deliberate. "You don't understand what you're messing with. That bloodline you're so eager to unravel? It's not a blessing. It's a curse. Henry knew it. Eleanor knew it. You think they kept secrets because they wanted to? No, they were protecting you." Protecting. The word hit me like a slap. All those nights I spent thinking Henry abandoned me, that my family left me to piece together the shards of a story alone. Was it protection? Or just another cage? Michael's jaw flexed, his voice sharp. Funny way of protecting people. Stalking them, threatening them. The man's smile faltered, replaced by something harder. "Last chance. The tin or this end's bloody." Michael moved first. His pistol cleared leather in a blur, aimed square at the leader's chest. The cabin erupted. One of the younger men lunged at me. I barely had time to grab a chair and swing it between us. The chair splintered, knocking him sideways, but he came back fast, fists flying. I ducked one blow, felt another glance off my jaw, the taste of iron filling my mouth. Michael fired. The shot rang out like thunder, deafening in the small space. The leader stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, blood blooming through his coat. He didn't fall, though. He just snarled, like the bullet was an inconvenience. The third man drew a knife, its blade flashing in the dim light. He slashed toward Michael, who sidestepped and cracked him across the temple with the pistol's grip. I grabbed a broken chair leg, swinging wild, catching my attacker in the ribs. He grunted, staggered, then barreled into me, driving me against the wall so hard the breath shot out of my lungs. Everything turned into a blur of fists, wood, and chaos. My ears rang from the gunshot. My muscles burned, but adrenaline pushed me harder. Finally, I managed to shove the man off, slamming the chair leg across his knee. He crumpled with a howl. Michael barked at me, "Back door, go!" We didn't wait to see if the leader would recover. Michael grabbed my arm, dragging me through the kitchen and out the warped back door into the night air. The forest swallowed us whole, branches clawing at our clothes as we sprinted into the dark. Behind us, shouts rang out, boots pounding, the hunt beginning. We ran until my lungs burned, until every muscle screamed, but we didn't stop. Not until Michael shoved me behind a boulder near the creek, both of us collapsing into the dirt, gasping. "They won't stop," I wheezed. "No," Michael said grimly. "They won't." He pulled the tin from his jacket, checking it like it was more valuable than gold. "But now we know. Aurelius, that's what they've been guarding." I pressed a hand against my throbbing jaw, blood slick on my lip, "and they'll kill to keep it hidden." Michael looked at me, his gray eyes fierce even in the moonlight. "Then we don't let them. Henry wanted this brought to light. You and me." We finished what he started. I swallowed hard. Part of me wanted to crawl back to Asheville, lock the library doors, and never speak of Aurelius again. But another part, the part that burned every time I thought of Samuel smirking, of those men chasing us to the woods, knew Michael was right. This wasn't about curiosity anymore. This was survival. We made camp in the forest, too risky to head back to the road. Michael built a small fire, the flames flickering low, while I washed blood from my face in the creek. The tin sat between us, unopened again. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The forest buzzed with insects, an owl hooting somewhere distant, but it all felt sharper, like danger could step out from behind any tree. Finally, Michael broke the silence. When I was a kid, I used to dream my father wasn't really my father, that somewhere out there was a man who actually gave a damn. If Henry was that man, then maybe I finally got an answer. But it also means my whole life was built on lies. His voice cracked slightly, though he masked it with a sip of water. I stared into the fire. My grandfather was supposed to be my compass. But now, I don't even know if I want to know where this path leads. Michael gave a tired chuckle. Too late now. He was right. I leaned back against the boulder, exhaustion pressing down heavy, but my mind spun. The Aurelius bloodline, the order, Samuel, it was all tied together, and we had just painted targets on our backs by holding on to that tin. Sleep came in fits, every rustle jerking me awake. I dreamed of Henry's voice, of whispers in the woods, of silver rings tightening around my throat. When dawn broke, I sat up to find Michael already awake, tin open in his lap. His eyes were locked on a page I hadn't seen yet. "What is it?" I croaked. He handed it to me, a letter written in neat, careful script. Not Henry's, not Eleanor's. If you are reading this, the blood has reached you. The order will not allow its history to be broken. But the truth is older than their oaths. Seek the ledger in Charleston. It holds the names. It holds the sins. Charleston. I looked up at Michael. His face was pale, but his jaw was set. "Looks like we're heading south," he said. And just like that, the hunt widened. The paper trembled slightly in my hands as I reread the words. Seek the ledger in Charleston. It holds the names. It holds the sins. Names. Sins. Those words had weight. Whatever this ledger was, it wasn't just a book. It was a record the Order of Aurelius had been guarding for generations. Michael folded the paper back into the tin and tucked it safely into his jacket. "We'll leave tonight," he said, his voice steady but low. "Less eyes on the road after dark." I nodded, though unease coiled in my gut. Charleston was a 5-hour drive, maybe more if we took back roads. Every mile meant more chances for the Order to spot us. But what choice did we have? We waited until dusk before making our move. Michael parked his truck deeper in the woods, covering it with a tarp and brush. "We'll take yours," he said. "Less obvious. They'll be looking for me." I wasn't sure if I liked the idea of my old Ford Ranger carrying the weight of our escape, but he wasn't wrong. His plumbing truck, with the company's name on the side, was a beacon. The highway stretched dark and empty as we rolled south, headlights cutting through the night. For the first hour, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being followed. Every pair of headlights in the rear view had my pulse climbing. Every turn of the road made me wonder if silver rings were waiting at the next stoplight. But nothing happened. The road remained empty, the night eerily quiet. Michael broke the silence first. When I was a kid, my mother used to tell me stories about old bloodlines. Not bedtime fairy tales, the kind whispered in church basements, around funerals. She'd say, "Our family's been chosen, Michael, and chosen blood pays a price." I thought it was just her way of making sense of my father's cruelty. But now it sounds like she knew more than she let on, I said. He gave a grim nod. "Yeah." We drove in silence for a while after that, both of us lost in our own thoughts. The map pinned in my mind kept growing wider. Henry, Eleanor, Michael, the Order, the Aurelius name, and now Charleston. Whatever ledger waited there, it was supposed to be the key. It was just past midnight when I saw it. Headlights behind us. Far back at first, then closer. Michael noticed too. His posture shifted, hands tightening on his knees. "How long has he been there?" "Couple miles," I said, my throat dry. The car, a black sedan, kept its distance, hanging 2 lengths behind us. Too far to be aggressive, too close to be coincidence. Michael's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Don't panic. Just take the next exit. I did. The sedan followed. The knot in my stomach tightened. Another exit, Michael ordered. I turned off again, onto a county road that wound between patches of forest and farmland. The sedan's headlights stayed right with us. Michael swore under his breath. All right, pull into that gas station up ahead. Bright lights, cameras. If they're serious, they won't move there. We rolled into the lot, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The sedan slowed, then passed by, disappearing into the night. Relief sagged through me, though it didn't last long. Michael leaned closer, his voice low. They're probing us, testing if we'll run, and they know where we're headed. My chest tightened. Charleston. Exactly, he said, which means we got less time than we thought. We made it to Charleston by dawn, bone-weary and strung out on caffeine. The city stirred awake around us, its cobblestone streets and old churches bathed in pink light. The letter hadn't given us much. The ledger is in Charleston, but Michael had an idea. If it's old, if it holds names and sins, then it's not sitting in a bank vault. It'll be where records always end up. A church or an archive. We started with archives. Spent hours combing through dusty libraries, old municipal buildings, courthouses that smelled like mildew. Nothing. By the second day, frustration gnawed at me. We were chasing shadows, and every second wasted was another chance for the order to tighten its net. That night, slumped in a booth of a greasy diner, I snapped. What if the ledger doesn't exist? What if it's another breadcrumb they planted just to keep us moving? Michael stirred his coffee slowly, his expression unreadable. It exists. Henry wouldn't have pointed us here otherwise. How can you be sure? I pressed. He leaned forward, his eyes locking on mine. Because men like Samuel don't chase smoke. They chase fire. And if they're chasing us this hard, then we're closer than we think. His conviction steadied me, but I still needed a direction. That's when a voice spoke behind us. You're looking in the wrong places. I turned. An old woman stood near our booth, her cane resting against a table. She wore a faded shawl, her hair white, her eyes sharp as broken glass. Michael stiffened. Excuse me. She slid into the booth across from us without asking. I've seen your faces. Not here, long ago. Your grandfather's eyes, boy. And yours. She looked at Michael, just like Eleanor's. My heart stuttered. You knew them? She nodded once. Everyone tied to the order knew them. Some served. Some resisted. Your blood has always been tangled in it. And now you're at the doorstep. I swallowed hard. The ledger. Do you know where it is? Her lips curled faintly, almost a smile. Not no. Guarded. The order hid it in St. Augustine's Cathedral, beneath the oldest altar. But it's not just names you'll find there. It's truth, and truth can kill. Her words hung heavy, but before I could ask more, she stood. Careful, boys. They'll bleed the city dry before they let you touch that book. Then she shuffled out into the night, swallowed by the streetlights, leaving Michael and me staring at each other. St. Augustine's. We finally had a target. But as I lay awake in the motel that night, listening to the hum of the AC, one thought gnawed at me. If the ledger really held all the names, then it didn't just tie Michael and me to the order. It might expose everyone, alive or dead, who'd ever been part of it. And men who guard secrets for centuries don't let them go without blood. I woke before dawn, the motel curtains glowing faintly with the promise of morning. Sleep had been thin, broken by flashes of Eleanor's desperate eyes, Henry's warnings, and the old woman's words echoing like a bell toll. Beneath the oldest altar, Michael sat at the small table by the window, staring into a cold cup of coffee. His shoulders were rigid, like he hadn't closed his eyes all night. "You're sure about this?" I asked, my voice rough. He didn't look at me. "If she's right, the ledger's in St. Augustine's. And if the ledger's there, so is the truth. The order won't stop hunting us until it's ash." He finally turned, his face pale under the dim light. "And if we touch it, maybe we don't walk out." I nodded slowly. "Then we touch it anyway." We reached the cathedral just as the city stirred to life. Its steeple towered above the historic district, Gothic stone weathered by centuries of salt air and rain. Tourists gathered on the steps, snapping photos. To them, it was a landmark, a pretty backdrop. To me, it was a tomb waiting to be opened. Michael and I split up, pretending to be casual visitors. I wandered inside, my footsteps echoing across the polished stone floor. Candles flickered near the front, their flames soft against the morning gloom. And then I saw it, the oldest altar, a heavy slab of carved marble, its edges worn smooth. Behind it, stained glass spilled red and gold light, casting long shadows across the nave. I knelt as though in prayer, heart pounding, fingers brushing the edge. No seams, no hinges, just cold stone. Michael appeared beside me, murmuring under his breath like he was reciting a psalm. Basement access. Priest's stairwell near the choir. We rose, heads bowed like devout parishioners, and drifted toward the side aisle. Sure enough, a small wooden door sat tucked behind the choir stalls. Michael slipped a lockpick from his pocket. It felt absurd, seeing a plumber carry a thief's tool, but he made quick work of the lock. The door creaked open. Darkness yawned beyond. The stairwell smelled of dust and mildew, each step groaning under our weight. At the bottom, a narrow corridor stretched ahead, lined with rough stone. I flicked on my phone's flashlight, the beam cutting through thick shadows. We found ourselves in the crypt. Rows of carved niches lined the walls, each holding ancient urns and bones. Time seemed to press heavier here, the air thick with the weight of the dead. Michael's whisper carried, low and taut. She said beneath the altar, which means it's here somewhere. We split up, running our hands along the walls, tapping stones, listening for hollows. My pulse thudded louder with every second. Then I heard it, a faint clink as my knuckles rapped against stone that gave back an echo. "Here," I hissed. Michael joined me, running his fingers along the slab. A faint carving marked the surface, a sun with 12 rays, the symbol I'd seen on Samuel's ring. Michael pressed against it. The stone shifted. A section of the wall groaned open, revealing a narrow passage. The passage led us into a small chamber, colder than the crypt. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it, a single iron-bound chest. Dust coated its surface, thick as ash. Michael exhaled sharply, his breath fogging in the chill. The ledger. I stepped closer, my flashlight beam trembling across the wood. Carved into the lid were names, faint and weathered, but still legible. Aurelius, Beaumont, Cross, dozens more, the list sprawling across the surface. My throat tightened. It's a record of every family, every tie. Michael rested his hand on the chest, his knuckles white, and every sin they buried with them. We both knew opening it meant crossing a line. Still, I reached for the latch. It lifted easily. Inside lay a massive book, its leather cracked, its edges charred as if it survived fire. I lifted it carefully, the weight of centuries heavy in my arms. When I opened the first page, my chest constricted. There they were, names upon names, written in precise ink. Beside each name, symbols, dates, cryptic notes. Some crossed out, some circled. And then I saw mine, Ethan Cross. Beside it, a mark I didn't recognize, and the word Heir. My stomach flipped. "Michael, I'm in here." His eyes darted over the page. His own name etched 2 lines below mine. Michael Beaumont. Shield. What the hell does that mean? I whispered. Before he could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed down the stairwell. We froze. Faint voices carried through the stone corridor. Men. Several of them. Michael's jaw clenched. They know. He grabbed the ledger, tucking it under his arm. I slammed the chest shut, heart hammering, and we darted toward the passage. But the chamber had no second exit. The only way out was the way we came, and the order was already in the crypt. Michael's eyes darted around, searching. His flashlight caught something in the corner, a small grate, half buried in rubble. He rushed over, pulling at it. "Help me." I shoved the stones aside with shaking hands, dust filling my lungs. The grate groaned open, revealing a narrow tunnel sloping downward. The voices grew louder now, English mixed with Latin, commanding, certain. Michael shoved the ledger into my arms. "Go." I stared at him. "Not without you." He didn't argue, just dropped into the tunnel, his boots splashing into shallow water below. I followed, hauling the grate back into place just as light beams swept into the chamber above. We ran through the dark, the tunnel twisting like veins beneath the cathedral. Water splashed at our ankles, rats scurried along the walls, and every step felt like it carried centuries of dust and blood with it. We finally burst out into the open air, gasping, covered in grime. The tunnel spat us into an alley behind the cathedral, the sun climbing high above Charleston. Michael leaned against the wall, clutching the ledger tight. His face was pale, but his eyes burned. "We've got it." I wiped sweat from my brow, my hand shaking. "And they know we've got it." He looked at me then, something unspoken passing between us. We'd taken their most guarded secret, the heart of their power. There would be no going back, no pretending this was just about family history anymore. The order wouldn't stop, and we couldn't either. That night, in another nameless motel, we spread the ledger across the bed. Its pages whisper with every turn, revealing a web of corruption so vast it made my head spin. Names of politicians, judges, business leaders, some long dead, others very much alive. But what chilled me most wasn't the power they held. It was the bloodlines. The families marked not just for wealth or influence, but for sacrifice. Every few generations, one chosen. Heir, shield, vessel. I ran my hand over the ink beside my name, the word heir glaring back like a curse. Michael's voice was steady, but low. "Whatever this means, it's not just about the past. It's about us." I looked at him, my heart pounding. "Then we find out. We follow it to the end." He closed the ledger, the sound sharp in the silence. And for the first time, I felt the weight of destiny pressing down, cold and immovable as a cathedral stone. I couldn't sleep. The motel clock blinked 3:17 a.m., and every time I closed my eyes, the ledger's pages flashed behind them. My name burned in my mind. Ethan Cross. Heir. Michael sat across from me at the flimsy motel desk, a single lamp casting yellow light over the cracked leather book. His fingers traced a faded ink as if it might disappear if he didn't hold it down. "Listen," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "We got two options. We run, burn it, bury it, vanish." I shook my head before he could finish. "Or we figure out why the hell our names are in there. Why us? Why now?" His jaw tightened. You saw the pattern. Every few generations, someone's marked. Heir, shield, vessel. They're not just names, they're roles. I leaned forward, pulse thudding. And we're next in line. We spread the ledger out again, flipping through brittle pages. Most entries were written in neat, almost calligraphic script, but scattered throughout were symbols, circles, crosses, suns with 12 rays. When I reached the page with my name, I noticed something I hadn't before. A faint stain, brown and brittle at the edges, smeared beside the word heir. Blood. I muttered. Michael frowned. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen enough cuts on the job to know dry blood when I see it." I touched it, my fingertip tingling as though the page remembered something. Michael flipped back to his own name. Michael Beaumont. Shield. Beside it was another stain, smaller, like a fingerprint press in crimson. We stare at each other, unease pooling heavy in the room. "This isn't just record-keeping," he said. "This is ritual." A soft knock at the door snapped us both to attention. We froze. "Room service." A voice called lightly. Michael's face went pale. We hadn't ordered anything. He shut the ledger and shoved it into his duffel. My hand went instinctively to the wrench I kept in my bag. We said nothing. The knock came again, harder this time. "Room service." The voice was firmer now, lower, stripped of its false cheer. Michael pointed to the bathroom window. We moved quickly, silently, pushing it open. The glass screeched faintly, and I cursed under my breath. The knock became pounding. "Open up, Ethan Cross. We know you're in there." My stomach dropped. They knew my name. We scrambled through the narrow window, dropping into the alley behind the motel. The night air was damp, fog curling around the dumpsters. My boot splashed into a puddle, sending ripples through the silence. Behind us, the motel door slammed open. Voices barked orders, heavy footsteps spilling into the hall. Michael jerked his head toward the street. "Move." We ran, the ledger thumping against his side with every stride. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, though I couldn't tell if they were for us or just another Charleston night. We ducked into side streets, weaving through dark alleys until my lungs burned and my legs screamed. Finally, we collapsed behind an abandoned warehouse, the shadows swallowing us whole. Michael presses back to the wall, chest heaving. They're closing in faster than I thought. I rubbed sweat from my brow, trying to steady my breath. Then we have to stop running. We need answers, and this book is the only place we'll find them. We lit a small lantern inside the warehouse, its glow flickering over rusted beams. Michael pulled the ledger out again, his hands trembling now, not with fear, but with urgency. He flipped further than we'd gone before. Near the middle, pages had been sewn in later, the handwriting different, harsher, more angular. These weren't names anymore. They were instructions. The heir carries the burden. The shield protects. The vessel bears a sacrifice. My mouth went dry. Sacrifice. Michael scanned the page, his brow furrowing. It says the vessel is offered so the others can live. That's why some names are crossed out. He jabbed a finger at the list. "Look, every vessel marked has a date beside it. And after that date, gone. No descendants. Erased." A chill swept over me. So whoever's marked vessel doesn't make it. Michael's lips pressed into a thin line. And the heir? The heir inherits everything. The bloodline, the sins, the order's secrets. The shield exists only to keep the heir alive until ritual is complete. I swallowed hard, staring at him. "So you're my shield." He didn't flinch. "Looks that way." "And the vessel?" I asked, though my gut already twisted with the answer. He flipped another page, his face tightening. "Claire." The name was written in the same harsh ink. Claire Whitmore. Vessel. A date sat beside it. 2 weeks from now. I felt my stomach drop. She's marked to die. Michael rubbed his temples, muttering, "This is bigger than we thought. They're not just manipulating politics, money, power. They're binding bloodlines to rituals. Sacrifice one, control the rest." I clenched my fists, the weight of rage mixing with dread. "We can't let them touch her." Michael's eyes met mine. "You're still in love with her, aren't you?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. The truth was written on my face anyway. He sighed, closing the book with a heavy thud. "Then we've got a choice. We either destroy this ledger, burn the evidence, and maybe buy our own lives back, or we use it, expose them, and put ourselves and her directly in the crosshairs." The lantern flickered, shadows stretching long across the floor. I thought about the blood stains beside our names, the mark of the heir and the shield, about Claire, her laugh, the way she once looked at me like I was more than just another man dragging chains of the past. And I thought about sacrifice. "No," I said finally, my voice firm. "We don't burn it. We fight. We find the truth, we protect Claire, and we tear the order apart piece by piece. Michael studied me for a long moment. Then he gave a single nod. Then we'll need help. Someone who knows their rituals better than we do. Who? He hesitated. There's a name in the ledger, not a family line. A betrayer. Someone who turned against the order a century ago and lived to tell about it. I frowned. That's impossible. Maybe, but his descendants are still here. One of them teaches at the university, specializing in Southern religious history. If anyone can decode this, it's him. Dawn was breaking when we slipped from the warehouse. The sky painted in streaks of pink and gold. The city was waking, but for me, the world felt darker than ever. I glanced at Michael, who carried the ledger close to his chest, and whispered a thought that had been gnawing at me since I saw the word beside my name. What if this book isn't just recording history? He looked at me sharply. What do you mean? What if it's deciding it? He didn't answer, and that silence was louder than anything else. By the time the sun had burned through the Charleston haze, Michael and I were already on the road, the ledger wrapped in canvas and hidden beneath the seat. Every bump of the highway felt like it rattled secrets loose, like the book was whispering to itself. Michael drove in silence, jaw tight, eyes locked on the horizon. I stared out the passenger window, mind racing. The word beside my name, Heir, throbbed in my chest like a wound. Claire's name haunted me more. Vessel, 2 weeks. Finally, Michael broke the silence. The man's name is Dr. Samuel Greaves. Teaches at the university in Columbia. He's descended from a Greaves who supposedly betrayed the order in 1912. I frowned. How does someone betray something like this and survive? Michael shrugged. Maybe he didn't. Maybe that's just what they want us to think. Either way, Samuel's our only shot at decoding the rituals before they move on Claire. Her name cut through me like glass. I tightened my grip on the door handle, knuckles white. Vessel. Sacrifice. I wouldn't let it happen. We reached Columbia by noon. The campus stretched wide and leafy, old brick buildings framed by towering oaks. Students bustled across the quad, laughing, clutching books, blissfully ignorant of the storm rolling just beneath their world. Dr. Samuel Greaves' office was tucked inside a Gothic building with pointed arches and ivy climbing its walls. We climbed the steps, my nerves raw. Michael knocked on the door. After a pause, it creaked open. A man in his late 50s stood there, thin, pale, spectacles perched on his nose. His eyes, though, were sharp, assessing us with unnerving speed. "Mr. Beaumont," he said softly, his voice carrying a faint rasp. "And Mr. Cross. I wonder when you'd come." The hairs on my neck bristled. "How do you know who we are?" He smiled faintly, stepping aside to let us in. Because history repeats itself. And the ledger always finds its way back to the betrayer's bloodline. His office smelled of parchment and dust. The walls lined with books on theology, history, and anthropology. Sunlight slanted through stained glass windows, painting the shells in fragments of color. Greaves closed the door behind us and gestured to 2 worn leather chairs. "Sit. Show me the book." Michael hesitated, then placed the canvas-wrapped ledger on the desk. Greaves' hands trembled slightly as he unwrapped it, like a priest unveiling a relic. He flipped through a few pages, his lips moving silently as he read. When he reached the entries with our names, he stopped. His expression tightened. "So, it's you," he whispered. "The Heir and the Shield." I swallowed hard. What does it mean? He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. The Order believes bloodlines are vessels of power. Every generation, roles are chosen. The Heir inherits the knowledge and the curse, carrying it forward. The Shield is bound to protect the Heir at all costs. And the vessel, he hesitated, eyes flicking up to mine, is sacrificed. Blood is the anchor that keeps the Order's influence alive. I felt my throat close. Claire, her name is in there, marked vessel. Greaves' face softened, almost pitying. then she's already been chosen. The ritual is not symbolic. It is binding. Unless it is broken, she will not escape. Michael leaned forward, voice sharp. So tell us how to break it. Greaves exhaled slowly, adjusting his glasses. The rituals are older than the colonies, older than the church that shelters them. But every binding has a flaw. The betrayer, my ancestor, discovered one. That is why he lived. I gripped the edge of my chair. What flaw? Greaves lowered his voice, as if the walls themselves might be listening. If the vessel is claimed willingly, the ritual completes its cycle. But if the heir intervenes, if the heir rejects the role, the sacrifice is denied. The cycle fractures. My heart hammered. So if I stand in their way, you unmake centuries of power, he said simply. But it comes with cost. The heir who refuses his role inherits the weight of every broken cycle. Madness. Death. Worse. The room spun around me. My name in the ledger. Heir. My blood, carrying generations of chains. Michael's voice cut through. If it means stopping them, he'll do it. I shot him a glare. Don't decide that for me. He met my eyes, steady. You already know it's true. Greaves closed the book gently, resting his hand on the cover, like it was alive. The Order will not let you reach the ritual site. They know you carry the ledger, and they will move quickly. I stood, my hand shaking. Then we moved faster. Will they take her? Greaves hesitated, then reached into a drawer. He pulled out an old map, yellow with age, edges frayed. He spread it across the desk. Here, he said, pointing to a mark deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The old mission ruins, built in 1710, abandoned after fire. It is their chosen ground. Every vessel is bled there. My stomach turned, bile rising in my throat. When? Soon, he said quietly. 2 weeks at most. Perhaps less, if they fear your interference. I clenched my fists until my nails bit into my palms. Then we're not waiting. We go now. Michael nodded, already pulling the ledger back into the canvas. Greaves' gaze lingered on me as I turned to leave. Remember, Mr. Cross, defiance breaks the cycle, but it also claims a defiant. The Order was built on blood for a reason. Do not underestimate what it will take from you. We left the university and walked back to the car in silence. The way of what Greaves said pressed down like stone. Michael tossed the duffel into back seat and looked at me across the roof of the car. You heard him. You're the key. If you reject your role, the cycle dies. I stared at him, my hands gripping the metal tight. And if I don't? His jaw flexed. Then Claire dies. The truth was cold, simple, brutal. There was no middle ground. I slid into the passenger seat, my chest tight with fury and fear. As Michael started the engine, I whispered to myself, not again. I won't let them take her. The car rumbled to life, carrying us toward the mountains. The air grew colder with every mile, the Blue Ridge rising in the distance like silent sentinels. I thought about Claire, her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she painted the world brighter just by being in it. I thought about her name inked in blood, chosen by hands that had never known her. And I thought about my own, carved into a book older than me, older than reason. Heir. Maybe I couldn't choose the role they gave me, but I sure as hell could choose how I played it. And if the cycle demanded blood, then I'd make damn sure it wasn't hers. The highway narrowed into winding back roads as the Blue Ridge loomed ahead, blue-gray ridges stacked like the pages of some ancient, unreadable book. Michael kept his hand steady on the wheel, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. Every curve of the road, every stand of pine trees seemed like it might be hiding eyes. I hadn't slept since we left Columbia. Greaves' words rattled in my skull. The heir who refuses his role inherits the weight of every broken cycle. Madness. Death. Worse. I couldn't picture what worse meant, but the thought of Claire bleeding out in some ruined mission was worse enough. Michael broke the silence first. We're not charging in blind. We scout the ground, watch for their movements, figure out how many we're up against. I nodded, though my fists tightened in my lap. Waiting, scouting. It all felt like wasted time when Claire was out there, her clock ticking down. But rushing in would be suicide, and we both knew it. By late afternoon, we reached a small mountain town. One of those places where every diner has a cross hanging above the door, and every stranger looks like they already know your secrets. We checked into a roadside motel, its neon sign sputtering against the twilight. The room smelled of mildew and cigarette smoke. I dropped my duffel on the bed and pulled the ledger from under my jacket, setting it on the table. The weight of it had become a curse, like carrying a coffin around, one page at a time. Michael tossed me a granola bar from his pack. Eat something. You're no good starving. I ignored it, flipping the ledger open. I scanned the pages, hoping for something we'd missed. A hint about the ritual site, a weakness, anything. My eyes caught on an entry written in faded ink, dated 1872. The heir stood upon the mountain, and the shield fell before him. Yet the cycle endured. My chest tightened. I read it again. And again. Michael, this doesn't make sense. It says the shield fell, but the cycle didn't break. He came to stand over me, reading the line. His brow furrowed. Maybe the heir didn't refuse. Maybe he just let it happen. I looked up at him. You're the shield. He met my stare, steady but grim. Then I guess I've got to make sure I don't fall. The air between us grew heavy. The ledger didn't just record what had happened. It felt like it was warning us what was coming. That night, sleep finally claimed me, but it was no escape. I dreamed of Claire standing in the ruins, her white dress stained red, her eyes wide and hollow. Behind her, shadowed figures chanted, their voices like thunder in my bones. When I woke, sweat soaked my shirt. The clock on the nightstand blinked 3:17 a.m. Michael was still asleep, one arm draped over the edge of his bed, pistol holstered by his side. I sat up, heart hammering. Something wasn't right. The silence in the room was too deep. No cicadas, no cars on the road outside, no hum of the motel's ice machine. Just silence. Then 3 soft knocks on the door. I froze. Another knock. Slow. Deliberate. Michael stirred, hand moving to his pistol, without opening his eyes. You hear it too? I nodded. My throat felt dry as dust. He slipped out of bed and motioned for me to stay low. He edged toward the door, gun raised, and peered through the peephole. His shoulders stiffened. What is it? I whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he slowly backed away from the door, eyes locked on it. The knock came again, louder this time. Then a voice. Ethan Cross. My blood ran cold. The voice was low, gravelly, but it carried with it a weight I recognized. The same cadence I'd heard in that church in Charleston, when they whispered prayers that weren't prayers at all. Michael hissed, back window. Now. We grabbed the ledger in our packs, shoving the window open. The cold night air hit my face as Michael helped me climb out. My boots crunched on gravel as we slipped behind a row of rooms. But as we rounded the corner toward the parking lot, we weren't alone. 2 figures stood by our car, hooded, faces hidden in shadow. They didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there like they'd been waiting for us. Michael raised his pistol. Stay behind me. The figures stepped forward, and in the flickering glow of the motel sign, I saw the glint of something in their hands. Not guns, knives, curved and old, like something pulled from a museum case. I gripped the ledger to my chest and whispered, "They know." The fight was fast, brutal. Michael fired once, the shot echoing through mountains. One figure dropped instantly. The other lunged, blade flashing. Michael shoved me aside, the knife slashing across his arm. He grunted, pistol whipping the attacker before finishing him with a shot to the chest. The motel lights flickered as silence fell again, broken only by Michael's ragged breathing. He clutched his arm, blood seeping through his sleeve. I dropped to his side. "You're hit." "Just a scratch," he muttered through clenched teeth. "We need to move. Now." We ditched the car. It was compromised. Instead, we hiked to the tree line under cover darkness, the cold biting deeper with every step. By dawn, we were high in the foothills, the town far behind us. We found shelter in a collapsed barn, its roof half cave in, beams leaning like broken bones. Michael tore a strip from his shirt, binding his arm. I paced, my nerves raw. They knew exactly where we were. How? I demanded. Michael's jaw tightened. The ledger. It's not just a record, it's a beacon. That's how they track you. It's not the book itself. It's you. My stomach dropped. Me? You're the heir, Ethan. The cycle binds to you. Wherever you go, they feel it. I wanted to throw the ledger into the fire, to watch it burn to ash. But I knew it wouldn't matter. The ink was already under my skin. We rested until nightfall, then pushed deeper into mountains. The forest grew thicker, the air colder, silence pressing in on all sides. By the second night, we found the ruins. The mission stood like a skeleton in the clearing. Stone walls blackened by centuries-old fire, arches crumbling into the dirt. Ivy crawled up the walls, strangling what was left. The place reeked of damp earth and rot, but underneath it, faint and sour, was something else, blood. Michael crouched low, scanning with his binoculars. 2 centuries, maybe more inside. They're here already. My heart pounded. Claire could be inside. She could be. I forced the thought down. We wait until dark, then move. Michael lowered the binoculars, glancing at me. You're shaking. I hadn't even noticed. My hands trembled as I held the ledger. Greaves said the heir had to defy the roll. That's me. But what if I fail? What if I end up another name in the book? Michael placed a firm hand on my shoulder. Then I'll drag you back from the brink myself. You're not alone in this. Remember that. For the first time in days, the storm in my chest quieted, just a little. We hunkered down, watching the ruins as the last light faded. The shadows deepened, the air turning colder. Somewhere in the distance, an owl cried. I tightened my grip on the ledger and whispered, "Hold on, Claire. I'm coming." The ruins waited in silence, like a mouth ready to swallow us whole. And as the first stars blinked awake in the night sky, I knew tomorrow would decide everything. The night swallowed us as we crept toward the mission ruins, the trees parting like silent witnesses. Every footstep cracked twigs that sounded to my ears like gunshots. My lungs felt tight, every breath heavy, as if the mountain itself were weighing me down. Michael led the way, his pistol raised, his movements steady despite the bandage on his arm. I clutched the ledger under my jacket. The leather felt warm, pulsing almost like it had a heartbeat of its own. The closer we drew to ruins, the more it hummed against my chest, as though the book knew we were nearing the place where its history had been written and rewritten for generations. The mission came into view, a skeletal relic with stone arches jagged as broken teeth. Faint torchlight flickered inside, shadows shifting against the walls. Michael crouched low, motioning for me to do the same. We watched 2 sentries patrol the outer courtyard, their hooded heads turning mechanically, like they'd rehearsed this routine 1,000 times. 2 at the gate, Michael whispered. Probably more inside. We'll have to draw them out. I swallowed hard. How? He slid a stone across the ground, tossing it toward the brush on the far side of the clearing. It clattered loudly, breaking the silence. The sentry snapped to attention, one drawing a blade, the other reaching under his cloak. They moved toward the sound, leaving the entrance exposed. Michael gave me the signal, and we slipped across the courtyard, pressing ourselves against the cold stone wall. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure it would give us away. Inside, the air smelled of damp earth and candle wax. The ruined nave stretched long and dark, moonlight cutting to the broken roof. At the far end, an altar stood, cracked and leaning, draped with black cloth, and kneeling before it, bound at the wrists, was Claire. My chest seized. Her hair hung loose, strands clinging to her face. Even from here I could see the bruises on her cheek, the cut at her lip, but she was alive. She lifted her head slightly, as if sensing us, and for one heart-stopping moment, her eyes met mine across a ruin. Then I saw who stood beside her. The man was tall, draped in a dark coat that swept the floor. His face was pale, sharp-boned, eyes glinting with a cold fire. He held a ceremonial dagger in one hand, its blade etched with symbols I didn't recognize but somehow understood. They were meant for me. "The heir approaches," he said, voice carrying easily across the chamber. "As it is written." Michael raised his pistol. "Move, and you're dead." The man didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled. "The shield stands firm." "Good. It must be this way." The ledger burned against my chest. My knees nearly buckled under the weight of it. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but Claire's presence held me rooted. I couldn't leave her. Michael whispered without taking his eyes off the man, "You stay behind me. Don't engage unless you have to." But I couldn't listen. I stepped forward, my voice breaking. "Let her go. She has nothing to do with this." The man tilted his head, studying me like a specimen. "On the contrary, Heir, she is the thread that binds your choice. Will you sacrifice her to escape your role, or sacrifice yourself to save her? That is the cycle. That is the inheritance." My stomach dropped. Greaves' words echoed in my mind. The heir who refuses his role inherits the weight of every broken cycle. I realized then that Claire wasn't just a prisoner. She was leverage, the test. "Don't listen," Michael hissed. "They're trying to break you." But the man's eyes never left mine. "You feel it, don't you? The ledger calling. The blood of those before you. All you must do is take up the blade and finish what was started. Her life or yours. The cycle must be sealed." Claire shook her head desperately, tears streaking her face. "Ethan, don't listen to him." My chest constricted. The air too thin to breathe. My legs wanted to collapse, but rage kept me upright. Michael shifted, lining up a shot, but before he could fire, movement exploded from the shadows. Figures poured out from behind the broken pews. Half a dozen cloaked disciples, blades glinting in the torchlight. "Get down!" Michael barked, opening fire. The room erupted in chaos. Gunshots cracked, echoing off stone. The disciples surged forward, their chants rising, inhumanly loud. I dove behind a fallen beam, clutching the ledger like it was my only anchor to reality. Michael dropped one attacker, then another, but they kept coming. He moved like a machine, steady, efficient, but I could see the blood soaking through his bandage, slowing him down. Claire screamed as the pale man raised the ceremonial dagger above her. Something inside me snapped. I hurled myself forward, ledger in hand, slamming into man with all the force my body could muster. The blade clattered across the stone floor, his eyes widening in surprise. The ledger hit the ground and burst open, pages fluttering like wings. A gust of wind tore through the ruins, extinguishing the torches. Darkness swallowed us whole, and in that void I heard whispers, not from the disciples, not from Michael, not even from Claire. The whispers came from the book. "Choose." My vision blurred, the world spinning. I saw flashes, heirs before me, each facing the altar, each holding the blade. Some chose themselves. Some chose their loved ones. Every choice fed the ledger, every death sealing the cycle tighter. "Choose." Hands gripped my shoulders, shaking me. Michael's voice cut through the storm. "Ethan, fight it. Don't give them what they want." But Claire's cries pierced deeper. "Ethan, please." The pale man's laughter slithered through the dark. "There is no fighting fate, only fulfilling it." The dagger lay inches from my hand, gleaming even in the darkness. My fingers twitched toward it. My whole body ached to pick it up, to end this, to stop the screaming. But then Michael's words from the night before came back to me. You're not alone in this. Remember that. I tore my hand away from the blade. Instead, I grabbed the ledger, lifting it high. My voice broke as I shouted, I refuse! The whispers crescendoed, then cracked like glass shattering. A shock wave rippled outward, throwing disciples against the walls. The pale man screamed, clutching his head, his form flickering like a shadow in firelight. The torches reignited, and I saw the dagger on the floor, its symbols burning away into ash. The man staggered, his smile gone, replaced with fury. You cannot break what has no ending. Michael raised his pistol and fired point-blank. The man's body jerked, then collapsed on the altar, his blood spreading across the cracked stone. The disciples, seeing their leader fall, scattered into the night like startled birds. Silence fell, broken only by Claire's sobs. I stumbled to her, cutting her binds with trembling hands. She fell into my arms, her body shaking against mine. I held her tight, the ledger pressed between us. Michael leaned against a pillar, chest heaving, his face pale from blood loss. Well, he rasped, that's one way to rewrite history. I didn't answer. My gaze dropped to the ledger. Its pages were blank. Every word, every name, every cycle, gone. But the cover still pulsed faintly under my hand, like a dying heartbeat. I knew then this wasn't over. Not yet. The mountain seemed endless as we drove north, each mile a weight pressing deeper into my chest. Michael sat in the passenger seat, pale but stubbornly awake, his bandaged arm resting on the door. Claire leaned against the back seat window, silent, her eyes following the blur of trees. The ledger lay in my lap, heavier than any anchor I'd ever hauled. Every so often, I swore I felt a pulse, like a second heartbeat under my skin. We weren't running anymore. Michael was right. If this thing had roots, if the cycle had a birthplace, we had to find it. The ledger's blank pages weren't freedom. They were an invitation. And if I didn't close it for good, someone else would fill them. By dusk, we reached a desolate valley, hemmed in by ridges like jagged teeth. A dirt trail wound into the woods, ending at a stone church half buried by time. Its roof had collapsed decades ago, vines strangling the bell tower, the door hanging loose on rusted hinges. The air felt wrong the moment I stepped out of the truck. Still, too still, like the woods were holding their breath. Michael scanned the tree lean. This is it. Claire shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. It feels old, like it's been waiting. The ledger burned against my palm. Waiting. Yes. Inside, the church smelled of mold and ash. Wooden pews lay rotted, beams collapsed in heaps. At the far end, where the altar once stood, a circle of stone had been carved into the floor. Its surface was etched with the same symbols I'd seen on the dagger. The ledger trembled in my hands. Michael's voice was low, steady. This is where it began. I walked toward the circle, each step heavier than the last. The air thickened, humming, pressing against my skull. My vision blurred, then snapped into something else. I wasn't in the ruined church anymore. I stood in the same place, but whole, restored. Candles burned along the walls, and men in cloaks knelt in rows, chanting. At the center of the circle knelt another man, bound, head bowed. Beside him stood someone who looked like me. Same eyes, same jaw, but older, harder. He held the ledger open in one hand, the ceremonial dagger in the other. The first heir. The vision warped. The knife fell, blood spilled, and the ledger's pages filled, one after another, names scrawled in crimson ink. Each name echoed in my head, voices screaming in 1,000 tongues. When the vision snapped back, I was on my knees, clutching the book to my chest. Claire's hands were on my shoulders, shaking me. Ethan, stay with me. Michael stood near the doorway, gun raised, scanning. What happened? I staggered to my feet. It started here. The first sacrifice. The ledger was written in blood. The stone circle glowed faintly, symbols lighting like coals. The ledger's pages fluttered open, words scrawling themselves in fresh ink. Michael swore, "It's waking up." Claire stepped back, fear flooding her face. "Ethan, it's writing you." I looked down. She was right. My name was carving itself across the top line. No, I gritted my teeth. Not me. The ground shook, dust raining from the rafters. A voice filled the church, deeper than thunder, older than language. The air does not run. The air completes. The symbols on the floor flared, and from their light rose shadowy figures, disciples made of smoke and fire. Their chanting filled the room, their shapes converging toward me. Michael opened fire, bullets ripping through smoke, but the shadows reformed, stronger, hungrier. Claire screamed as they swarmed closer. The ledger seared my palms, the heat unbearable. The voice roared again. "Choose. The shield. The beloved. The heir." Michael spun toward me, eyes fierce. "Don't listen. It's baiting you." But the dagger appeared on the altar, glowed with the same runes, and in my chest I felt a pull, demanding blood. The cycle wanted a body. I staggered forward, torn between them. Michael, battered but unyielding, my brother in all but blood. Claire, trembling, eyes wide, her faith in me the only thing holding her upright. And me, standing at the center of a storm I'd never asked for. The dagger burned with promise. One cut, one sacrifice, and the voices promised it would end. But I remembered Greaves. The heir who refuses his role inherits the weight of every broken cycle. Not one more death. Not theirs. Not mine. I dropped the ledger into the glowing circle. The ground screamed, the stone splitting. The book writhed like a living thing, pages flapping in agony. The shadows shrieked, clawing at the air. I grabbed the dagger, but instead of raising it toward Michael or Claire, I drove it straight through the ledger. Light exploded, white and blinding. The shadows wailed, burning away into ash. The circle cracked open, the church trembling as if the mountain itself was collapsing. I felt something tear inside me, a thread snapping. The voices vanished. The ledger stopped pulsing. For the first time in weeks, my chest was quiet. When the light faded, the book was gone. Only ash remained, scattered across the stone. I collapsed to my knees, gasping. Claire rushed to me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders, sobbing into my neck. Michael lowered his pistol, staring at the smoldering circle. His voice was hoarse. Did it work? I looked at the ash, then at my empty hands. The warmth, the heartbeat, the pull, it was gone. My voice cracked. I think it's over. The silence that followed was heavier than any storm. Not oppressive, not dangerous. Just silence. For the first time, I believed it. We left the valley at sunrise. The church lay in ruins behind us, smoke curling into the sky like the mountain itself was exhaling. Michael insisted on driving, though his wound still slowed him. Claire leaned against me in the cab, her hand in mine. Neither of us spoke much. Words felt small compared to what we'd just survived. As the road curved out of the mountains, I rolled down the window. The air smelled clean, pine and river mist, not blood or ash. For the first time, I let myself breathe. Weeks later, back in Portland, I stood on the dock as the Atlantic stretched endless and cold before me. My boat rocked gently in harbor, nets stacked, ropes coiled. A normal day. Claire came up beside me, sliding her hand into mine. "You look lighter," she said softly. I smiled faintly. "I feel lighter." Michael had stayed behind in the Carolinas. He said he needed time, space to figure out who he was without the cycle pressing down on him. I owed him that. The ledger was gone. The cycle was broken. And yet, sometimes at night, I still woke in a sweat, half expecting to see words scrawled across my skin. But the pages stayed blank because they no longer existed. For the first time, my story was mine. I turned to Claire, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We've been through hell." She smiled, tired but strong, and came back. The ocean wind whipped around us, salty and sharp. I looked out at the horizon, endless and unwritten. My redemption, I whispered. And this time, it wasn't Maine I meant. It was me,